Hi everyone, this is Krista Moore with the Krista Moore Show, and I'm really excited that you're tuning in today. We have a really interesting subject, and I'm looking forward to talking to Lori Harris, who is one of the managing partners and co-founders of Harris White Cell Consulting, and I'm thrilled to have her as a guest today. Lori, are you out there? Hello? There you
Hello,
are.
everyone.
Hey, great to see you. So I think this subject is really cool. It's something that we don't often speak about or talk about or learn about. So I'm hopeful that those on the line today have a pen in hand and are really going to be engaged in our conversation. Before we begin, though, I would love for you to introduce yourself, kind of tell them all about Lori, and then we'll begin. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, hello, everyone. It's great to be on the show. Krista, thank you very much. I'm very grateful for the time today and to be able to spend time with your energy today and discuss cognitive leadership and what it means and talk about the process of the ABCs of thinking. So a little bit about me. I am a managing partner with Lynn Whitesell of Harris Whitesell Consulting. I am also a Forbes coach and writer, and I am honored to be also a Marshall Goldsmith coach. And my background is all about business strategy, and my education is all in organizational development and business management, project management. And a few years ago, I went back and I got my cognitive therapist certifications as well. So with all of that said, I bring those values to the table. I work with executives and successful leaders to make them more successful. So we focus on cognition, we focus on behaviors, and we look at where they are now, what are those gaps in where they want to be in the future, and what are the behaviors that are keeping them, stalling them, and not affording them the success that they desire.
And this term, cognitive leadership, I would love for you to explain it a little bit. Like, what exactly does that mean? I think it's important that we set that as the foundation for our topic.
Yeah, so sure. I want to say leaders who have that higher cognition, who truly have that self-worth and take the time and give the energy, and who are intentional and purposeful, who are courageous, who are humble, who are disciplined in their practices, and are focused on developing the people so that they can be better at what they do. Those are the individuals that afford purpose and clarity, motivation, and influence. And cognition truly is a simple process of being able to absorb our environment, hear and use our senses, our eyes, our ears. So being able to use our sensories beyond just the six, including the environmental sensories, and being able to make some good, solid decisions based on analysis, based on the ability to gather data and information, and to be able to listen to the information that's out there and not be triggered and react on those things that sometimes distort us and keep us from being more successful or stall us from being able to make better decisions.
Yeah, what this kind of means to me, and I'm just going to paraphrase a little bit and hopefully maybe help the audience understanding it as well, is that it is about being present, being self-aware, understanding, and like you said, using all those sensories around you, but really not reacting to a circumstance or a situation, but responding appropriately. And I'm sure it's more than that and deeper than that, but it seems to me, my opinion of that is that takes a lot of work. I mean, that would take very conscientious every moment, like, oh my gosh, am I thinking right? Am I saying right? So how does this all work? Like, is there a process that we can dive into to help those that want to be more authentic and more of a cognitive leader?
Yes, so absolutely. There's a couple things, Krista. You're absolutely right. It does take greatness to be a great leader, right? It does take intention. It does take purpose. It does take having some key core personal values that align to the organization values and to your team values. So yes, this is a job and it is important. And if we value that, guess what? We do it. And that's what gets exciting. But we do know out there, it's pretty common that there's 8 traits that bad leaders have. So when we recognize these, we want to make sure that we don't distort them and that we don't dig into the status quo of the shame and blame. But those are the egoistic person. It's all about me. It's always about me. It's going to be about me, nobody else. Or the poor communicator, the person who doesn't have ethics, the one who doesn't really support the team, who fails to provide adequate training or share information, that person who doesn't ever trust or lacks the pride or the spirit or the passion and commitment, or the one that just refuses to say thank you or be grateful for anything, or has this stubbornness and this fixed mindset about themselves. So those are kind of characteristics of somebody who is in leadership that sometimes isn't necessarily a good or great leader. And
Yeah,
then
it's interesting as you were listing them. We have this exercise that we do with a lot of our clients, and it's in the book as well. And it's called Good Boss, Bad Boss exercise, clearly. And so we're whiteboarding and we're hearing from a group, what are those characteristics? And it's interesting because if we rolled up what we've heard over the years on the bad boss, what you just kind of hit the head on that, the nail on the head. So are you saying that cognitive leadership is understanding if there's a gap for you personally compared to those bad boss characteristics?
Can I bring up one more thing? I want to really make a point. And the research out there shows that more often where we recognize bad leadership is when we lack or our organizations have bad or disengaged employees. So unengaged employees or disengaged employees. And we know that over 67% of our employees are unengaged. We know that it costs 1/3 of their annual salary when they're disengaged. It costs the organization that much more money to sustain these unengaged and disengaged employees. And we know that 22% of their employees say that their leadership have a vision. So that's saying that 88% of employees aren't sure that their leadership has a vision. We also know that only 15% of employees are saying that their leadership is influential. All of these things, and there's a lot more statistics out there that tell us that, guess what? We got to work on our cognition. We've got to be more thoughtful, more mindful, more intentional, more self-aware, and more cognitive, more purposeful about the process in which we make decisions.
Well, and when you think, and just hearing those stats are pretty alarming. And I know there's some, in terms of, I think it was like 78% of employees quit because of their boss, so there's all kinds of staggering numbers and facts around the impact that effective leadership can have on an organization, both positive and negative financial impact. So I think that really does set the stage for the importance of this subject.
It is.
I was going to ask you had talked to me about the A, B's, and C's of this, and I'd love to break it down a little further for our audience in terms of this doesn't have to be difficult. It sounds complicated and it sounds very intentional and very time consuming, but let's break it down for them a bit, and maybe that will help them understand what areas they can begin working on.
So it's called the ABCs of cognitive leadership thinking. And the A is basically the triggers, and it's the world experiences, the people, your past experiences, your history. It can be some anxiety from the future, or even some things that you maybe within yourself that you judge yourself or have. But it's those triggers in us that keep us from being more successful. So that's the A.
But how do you discover what the A is? How do you discover that in someone?
Yeah, so it's through being able to identify how you behave. So ultimately through this process, it equals into success, and that success is the positive behavior that you're going to demonstrate and gain your rewards from, I guess is what I want to say. So the triggers are the A, and that can also be positive as well. They can be positive motivators as well that trigger us. And then the B, so it's
A. That's where I'm trying to understand, and maybe I wasn't really too clear on that question, but as an executive coach or a business coach, how do you get to those triggers? How do you get to, fully discover? It sounds like psychology and therapy more than coaching.
Yeah, and that's truly, it's something where scientifically, I would use the word scientifically versus therapy or psychology. I think scientifically, we have the ability to look at how we process data and how we process experiences. And what's important about that is that as leaders, we're often reactive. And even as people working in organizations, we're often reactive, or we work out of habit. We're trained to do something, and so we do it because it's the thing that we always do. So what's important is when we don't feel right, when our senses are telling us that, uh-oh, this isn't the right thing, or we know ethically that it's not right, or the people around us are reactive to the situation as well. Those are all signs that we might want to look to see and measure the emotional state of and the condition of our environment and the people in our organizations. A lot of times when it's negative and it's impacting the organization's bottom line and profitability, it is often emotional, and those emotions are triggered from distortions.
Well, can you give me an example?
Sure thing. So one of the biggest things that we do is we catastrophize things. So what we do is we take a fairly minor negative event and we blow it out of proportion. And we let our imaginations run. And a lot of times it's based on things that we've experienced before or we've seen. Think about all the things we see on TV or that we watch and we see. So our brain, unfortunately, sometimes works before our heart and our mouth does. So it goes crazy and it thinks about all these things. And we just blow it out of proportion and we imagine all sorts of disastrous results that could happen in the future. And guess what it does? It creates anxiety. And that anxiety creates the chemical reactions that create us to stop and slow down.
Okay.
And it keeps us from moving forward. Or we jump to conclusions, or we shame and blame. We disqualify things, we filter things. It could be overgeneralizing things or labeling things. We'd like to label, right? We have a whole system based on categorization and labeling. So all of those things are common distortions that can trigger behavior.
Okay. So that would be the A in essence, is really understanding what those triggers are, what those distortions are, kind of where they're coming from, typically from past experiences or frame of references that just bubble up in us.
Exactly. And then our B, so we've got A and we add it to B. And the B is often neglected. This is what normally gets skipped, and this is where we go from A to C and we become reactive. But in the B, that's where we gather our thoughts. That's where we take a moment to be mindful. That's where we also do our analysis and our validation. And the things that we analyze, the things that we validate, and the things that we think about should be the attitudes, the rules, the demands, the beliefs, the images that we see, and the meaning and definitions that we know currently and that we should know. So again, doing the research it takes in order to be able to make better decisions. B is the key to this. And this is where we often, as Stephen Covey always says, begin with the end in mind. We often forget to do that validation and that analysis. So
and when you're referring to the validation and the analysis, and I'm sorry I'm asking these questions, but I'm just so curious about this. When you do the validation and the analysis, is that in the moment? Like, okay, here's what's happening, stop, pause, look at the data, validate, before you just respond, I guess. And here's my second part of that question, or is this gathering thoughts, is this part of self-discovery and coaching in general, to understand better, what's holding you back, or what's happening in a situation that you tend to skip over?
So Krista, it's situational, and it's both.
Okay.
This is the great opportunity we have here. For some individuals, especially those that are humble and courageous and disciplined, discipline comes into play here. For some individuals who are great leaders, they have the ability to stop and pause and really do the analysis and validation. And those great leaders often pull in their subject matter experts, and they go and do the research that's needed before they act on or create a decision on. There are, though, now let's think back to those, the stats that I shared earlier. When we talk about unengagement or lack of engagement, when we talk about leadership that doesn't have vision, those are the individuals that are skipping this B. And that is truly, that target is truly critical, because coaching helps us identify those distortions that are keeping them, stalling them, and keeping them from being more successful or being their best.
And then I'm thinking too, if you have a coaching client and it's a leadership development client, and you're helping them be more of a cognitive leader, then this stage is really through practice, right? It is, okay, stop, pause, think, analyze, step back before you just do what you naturally would do. And I think I get that. Yeah.
Yeah, and most importantly for great leaders, it's really important to have trust. So being able to have credibility, and in this process, we can't do it alone. Leaders don't get to where they are without being on the shoulders of giants, right? So we can't get to it alone. And by pulling in your team, and by asking and being out there with your team and talking with them and developing relationships with them, we talked about how quickly you can make this be happen. The better leader you become, the more relationships that you develop positively, and the more trust you have in your organization. Guess what? This B can speed up.
Sure.
The more effective
because you're talking about like collateral knowledge, collective knowledge.
Exponential.
When it comes to like the data and the analysis. And I know it's not just the numbers, but it's of the situation.
Right.
Getting all and collecting all the information. And that's where a team is certainly going to come into play. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the next step in the phase is C. Yeah. And so C is our emotions, our physicalness, and behaviors. So let's talk about emotions. Those can be healthy or unhealthy. Depending on if you've skipped B or not, they're going to be one or the other, right? And physical, now think about this, because this can be good or bad. Think about when you're highly motivated and you've had something incredibly positive happen. Do you sometimes feel the adrenaline rush? Do you sometimes feel your body just get excited? And all of a sudden the energy starts pumping. Or sometimes when we get anxiety or we get afraid, fear-based, our body will shake. Sometimes you'll feel dizzy, or you're not able to breathe. Or when you're totally stressed, it's really hard to breathe. Your muscles will constrict. because the chemicals that are producing are based on the thoughts, the cognition piece. So it does come out in both the emotions and the physical. And then eventually we react, we act, right? So we've got either a reaction or an action, and that's the behavior. It's either constructive and positive, or it's going to be self-defeating. And
Yeah, well,
where,
I can, I'm just imagining and remembering my past experiences in dealing with a variety of different leaders that definitely were not cognitive,
right.
And very emotional, and they got away with that in in the old days, so to speak. Maybe today we're just a little bit more aware that that behavior is just unacceptable, and they do something about it. But I still think it does exist today within many organizations, and whether they're large organizations or small, it becomes more of a style that's defined over time and accepted or dealt with.
And it's behavioral. Bottom line, it truly is behavioral. And until someone has the courage to say, that's not effective, that's not creating value, that's not creating opportunity, that's not giving us the opportunity to grow the company and to grow and develop the people so that we can sustain the organization over a period of time. When you have someone,
it's almost, I was going to say too, and I don't know whether this is a correct view, but it's almost when that C level comes into play, when the behaviors and the emotions and the physical response that takes place, when an employee sees that, that's when it affects them the most. That's when there's going to be a physical and emotional response from, the team or the employees.
And eventually there's, Gallup and Career Builders and Conference Board, they all do these great surveys and studies. And there's things like 12% of employees actually leave the company because of money. But the rest of them often leave because they have bad leadership.
Yeah.
And they're afraid to say something because of fear of retribution. And then another statistic that's just profound is 58% of employees trust a stranger more than their own boss.
That's pretty crazy.
It is. So this is what's interesting is if we can work with leaders to change their cognition, to truly get them to begin to identify with their own self-worth and to realize and remove all this shame and blame that's out there, right? Let's get rid of all the distortions and let's really look at this and go, you know what? I do have distortions and sometimes they sneak up on me, but you know what? Next time I'm going to recognize it. So acknowledgement. Right, we can't fix the problem until we identify it and we acknowledge it.
Right, and it's almost and we say this all the time, and I think it's like a Jim Rohn quote. But if you want things to change, then you need to change. That's right. And often that's what it takes. It takes that conscious effort and statement, like, okay, I'm going to work on myself, and I know that I need to change and be different to be more effective. And it sounds like the ABCs of this cognitive leadership is a process or a method to really get there.
So can you see this?
I can.
Oh, it's backwards on here. Can you guys see this? Is it correct?
Actually, it's not backwards for our audience.
Good news. Well, what I will do for everybody is I will share this on Harris Whitesell Consulting's Twitter page. And I'll make sure I get this out there on LinkedIn as well for everybody. And they can go ahead and take a look at this. And if they've got any questions, they can absolutely reach out to me. I do want to share with you, there's some really good, authentic cognitive characteristics of people who are successful. And I kind of want to share a couple of those with you.
Okay, that sounds great.
Yeah, so authentic cognitive leaders, they are self-actualized individuals. They are aware of their own strengths and weaknesses. They know their limitations, and they also understand their emotions and what triggers them. And when they are triggered and it is negative, they know how to apologize appropriately. And they do it well, and they do it authentically and meaningfully. And another thing is that not only are they disciplined, but they're consistent, and they're committed to the well-being of the organization and the growth and development of their people. They're also people who are focused and want to make a tangible difference, and they develop a vision statement, and they live and breathe and communicate that vision statement in everything they do. And they have an enormous sense of pride about who they are, their company they work for, the products and services that they offer to the marketplace to meet the needs of their clients. They're very hospitable. They're very genuinely open-minded and continuously learning. And they are also incredibly humble.
Mm-hmm.
Those characteristics sometimes don't serve us well in a world where speed and innovation and technology challenges us to move as quick as we can in the marketplace so that we can be in business, and that is be profitable, right?
Yeah.
So there's a fine balance there, and coaching truly does give the ability for these individuals to work this out and massage out these ideas. And it is unique to individuals. And with something like stakeholder-centered coaching, it truly gives you the journey. It gives you that transformational journey to be able to not only begin to understand the behaviors that are keeping you from being more successful, but it also gives you the ability to hold yourself accountable with the people that matter most.
Mm-hmm.
Not just in your organization, but in and around your whole life. And coaching that leader through that and giving them key tools and key strategies and techniques and tactics to really help them grow so that they develop to be better every day.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds great. Wanted to just ask if it's okay if we share some contact information, and so others can get a hold of you if they want to reach out to you, as well as I think you have something that is a downloadable resource on your website that may help them better understand themselves. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so Lynn and I had the honor of taking a lot of research, and we developed a really great 5-minute quiz. And this quiz, actually, it's a 10-point quiz. It's a 10-question quiz, and it's all based on leadership behaviors. And these are behaviors that often either stall you or keep you from being more successful or being at your best. And so this is a quick, down and dirty 5-minute quiz, and it will give you a customized individual report. You'll have a graphic based on those 10 points, and it will show you actually areas where you can actually begin to work on that transformation with the code.
That sounds great. So it's free, it's simple, it's easy, and it's a way to actually begin that process of self-awareness and discovery.
Yes.
Love it.
Thank you.
Right. Is there anything else you want to add in the few minutes that we have remaining?
First, I'd just like, again, to thank you, Krista, and your staff, Joyce. You guys have been phenomenal to work with over the past couple weeks, and thank you again for having me on your show. I love sharing with other professionals in the industry. I think it's very powerful not to be competitive, but to be open-minded and connect so that we can, what I call, exponentially share the value of what we do and the credibility of what we do. It's very, very powerful. And so I just want to say thank you very much. And I'm open to any questions that anybody might have or any dialogue going forward. And you're more than welcome to reach me through the website or reach me on any of my social media.
All right, that sounds great, Lori. Thanks for the time today and this kind of interesting conversation that really gets us thinking about what can we do better and different to be a more effective leader. And it is quite deep, but I think it's an important topic. So thanks for sharing it.
You're very
Take
welcome.
care.
It's very
All right.
purposeful. Thank you.
Bye. Take
All right,
care.
bye.